The blood drained from my face as a wave of dizziness washed over me as I sat in a sweltering small box of a room in Poland. Frantically, I unwrapped a candy, my only hope of salvation, while Dolly Parton played over a crackling speaker and a neon sign buzzing in the background. Eat, sleep, riot, repeat. This is the story of me getting my first tattoo, and all of that just to show you that getting a tattoo can be a unique and memorable experience, especially when it comes to magical tattoos. So in today's video, we're going to be going over how to create a magical tattoo parlor, the artist for it, different hardware and tools designed for it, and of course the tattoo options themselves. Just right off the bat, this is not going to be a mechanical game focused video. This is definitely going to be more of a world building one. It is almost Wednesday. It's practically midnight, so I'm up recording instead. So the first thing is the actual tattoo parlor itself. Now I'm not going to walk through every single aspect of building out this parlor, but here's a couple of different ideas to get your brain thinking about some stuff and come up with some fantastical, unique ideas for your players. How prevalent and common is magic in your world, and how does that relate to tattoos? In a really high magical world, you're probably going to have different arcane enchantments in this tattoo parlor, like a mirror that when someone goes and looks at it, they can kind of like preview different tattoos on themselves, like they're in The Sims or something. Versus in a very low magic setting, you're probably going to have a tattoo parlor that is pretty similar to what we have in the real world. I think that's kind of boring. I like to play more high magic fantasy settings, but it's really up to you. How large is this parlor and how many people can get tattoos at once? Is it a huge sprawling warehouse of gnomes flying around giving tattoos, or is it a little side back room broom closet in a tavern or something like that, where it's one patron at a time? And of course, as you're starting to think about this, do consider the core functionality of the tattoo parlor. There's a couple things at a bare minimum that you're going to need. There's going to be a tattoo area, the place where somebody actually receives the tattoo. You're most likely going to have a waiting area, either for future patrons or friends of patrons to kind of hang out, almost like a lounge or a little bit of a lobby. And of course, you're going to have an area where the supplies and the tools, the ink, where all of those are stored. This could just be a little crate that they carry with them. It might be a bag of holding. It could be a sprawling, again, just huge like bookshelves and stacks full of stuff. So just think about this and how it fits into the world that you're building. All right, so where is the tattoo parlor located? For the sake of this, we're just going to assume it's in a city or a town, but there's no reason you couldn't do it in a cave in the middle of nowhere or on a traveling ship in the astral sea. You know, just have some fun with it. Play around. Get a little loosey-goosey, you know? So anyway, back to the city. Is it in this beautiful, handcrafted, very Roman-esque marble building, or is it in the rundown part of town where it's just these like a shanty town of buildings kind of crumbling, falling apart? There's litter, debris, broken things everywhere. Now this is probably going to affect the interior of the parlor, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Finally, does it have any unique features or decor? Now in my home game, the tattoo parlor that I was designing for my players that they didn't end up going to, because that's what happens, was built in with a hookah lounge. And that really is just because I thought it would be kind of cool, and that it would give the players who weren't getting tattoos, that it would give them something to do, is to talk with these other kind of rough and tumble parts, not exactly mafia, but you know, people who are just there hanging out, maybe gambling, playing some card games or something. Really, it just comes down to I thought it would be fun, and remember, you don't need any reason other than that. Just if you think it's cool, you can make it happen. Stop posting. Okay, are you listening? Listen, stop posting questions on Reddit of like, hey, can I do this? Can I put this in my world? Yeah. Spoiler alert, it's all made up. You can do whatever you want. Moving on. So maybe your parlor has another unique feature, like they could have barbecue, or maybe it's all themed on the interior like a garden in a palace, like a very Game of Thrones sort of thing. Or maybe there's no walls. The walls are invisible. People run into them. I don't know. I'm just, is there anything like that? And something to consider is that a lot of tattoo parlors in real life are going to have all sorts of art and maybe some cool sculptures and stuff along the walls that are going to give a little bit of a preview of the art style and just the overall vibe and tone of the place and the artist who's going to be doing the tattoos. So consider if you want any wall art. With the location out of the way, the next thing we're going to do is work on the tattoo artist, the person who's going to be delivering this tattoo. Again, we got just a couple of different ideas. I've written articles in the past. It's in some of my books about how to design NPCs in a more in-depth manner. This isn't exactly going to be that. It's just going to be some stuff to get you thinking, sloshing around some ideas up there, specifically related to a tattoo artist in your fantasy world. Now, with more important or recurring NPCs, you're going to want to ask yourself things like, what are their motivations? How do they tie into the main story? What information do they know? But of course, the tattoo artist probably isn't going to be all that important of a character, so you don't necessarily need to dive into it in that much detail. Okay, so first question, what tattoos does the artist have? It's not a for sure given thing, but probably someone who has dedicated their life to the craft and the art of putting permanent things on other people's bodies. They probably have a few tattoos of their own to express themselves and to show that they actually give a shit and care about doing tattoos. So just consider a couple of those. It doesn't have to be super in-depth. It could even be a simple description as small, stout dwarven woman with the shaved side of her head comes up, rolling up her sleeves, getting the tattoo instrument prepared. Along her right forearm, you can see different geometric shapes and almost fractal looking patterns, and you recognize these as being related to the Dawn Seekers, a faction of psychedelic wizards. That's a preview for my Patreon, so see what I did there? Okay, next, what is their general temperament and disposition towards the world? Are they just super pissed off and grumpy? Are they like really, really sweetheart and super bubbly? Just a couple words. We're just doing super broad strokes here. As a thought experiment to give you a little bit of an idea, think of a couple different stereotypes of people who might have tattoos. You have the big bad biker dude, or like the people in the gangs. Then you have the punk rock skaters. You have the very free loving hippie spirits, man. Or military folks who it could be very kind but are also stern and rigid, and you had better follow the rules or you're gonna get a talking to. So each of these people would interact with your PC in a very, very different manner. Even if you don't know the motivations behind them, you can at least get a general idea of how this person might go about their day. Now, when you're coming up with the artist, consider the design choices you made for the artist themselves and vice versa. Typically, you would expect these to be kind of related, but you can actually have some really cool, funny effects if you subvert the expectation and do the exact opposite. So kind of consider this example. Now imagine a grungy shop in the very rundown part of the town. The only way to get there is by going through a series of back alleys, and there's just broken glass scattered everywhere. And then the PCs get inside, and it still is kind of questionable, like, I don't know, might get tetanus or something. But then the artist steps out, and it's just the most prim and proper elf who holds their chin up high, and they have a stick shoved so far up their butt that you see a little bit splinters coming out their nose every time they sneeze. So finally, you want to ask yourself, how does this tattoo artist speak? I recently went through a masterclass. Neil Gaiman's masterclass teaches the art of storytelling. It was wonderful, but he says when designing characters, one of the very first things he comes up with is how the character speaks. You know, how do they sound when they talk? And this isn't necessarily limited to them just having a silly accent. Think about the cadence. Think about, is their voice kind of gravelly and slow like this? Or is it a bit higher pitched and wispy? But of course you can always just do silly accents, because that's probably 36% of the fun in playing D&D. You get to get out all that ADHD energy and just weird shit inside of you that's building. You just dump it on your friends and it's great. So there's also like slang they might use, certain phrases, just things like that. Like what is their internal monologue and how does that come across when they talk to people in the world? Okay, so the part where things can really start to get fun and you can be very, very creative with this is the hardware and the tools for how these magical tattoos are being delivered to the PCs. So the first example is an arcane quill, and this is the closest thing that I could come up with to a magical equivalent of a tattoo gun in real life. So what it is this large quill. It's this feather. Again, they just dip it in the inkwell, but then the artist kind of flicks it and then bzzz, it starts buzzing almost like in an electric pen. And then with that, they're able to kind of go in and draw the lines and fill in the tattoo. Now, if you wanted, you could of course add extra flair and make it a little bit more magical, and you could have the artist, once it's activated, that then they control it kind of with their mind, or they're standing a couple feet back, or maybe there's 7 of these magical vibrating floating quills working on the tattoo all at the same time. Okay, so the next one, this ink injection method, is pretty brutal. So what it is a big syringe, like BioShock, early 1900s, late 1800s, insane asylum type shit, and this long bore needle, and they suck up the ink out of it, and the ink is just bouncing all around in there. This is a violent method. And they take this needle and they plunge it right into the person's chest and release all the ink into them. And on the PC, you can see their veins start to bulge out a little bit and just turning black, or whatever color the ink is, and just filling all out, and they're just in so much pain. And then after a minute or two, the ink and their veins return to normal almost, and the ink kind of retracts and goes to the place where the tattoo will form, and shows up on their skin, almost like little termites under their skin, moving around until it forms solidly into place. So another one is a stencil rub method, and this one is much more pleasant, so don't worry, there's no little buggy references. The artist would place a stencil over the area where the tattoo is going to be, and then they take this kind of paste that's made up of ground diamonds or emeralds or whatever, and they mix it all up and rub it into the stencil and get it all so it's filled into the cracks and where it goes onto the person's skin actually. And then with a magical arcane flame, they heat it up and it kind of solidifies and recrystallizes almost, and then they're able to peel off the stencil, and there it is, just on the skin, burnt in. And then with maybe some holy water or something like that, they kind of rub and clean it off, and these little crystally flakes come off, revealing just the skin itself, which would then have the new tattoo. So one final method, just to give you some examples, and again, this is all just inspiration for you to think about for your world building endeavors, is branding iron. This one's pretty straightforward. It is exactly what it sounds like, but instead of leaving a scar and a burn mark, it would leave a tattoo. And you could even have it where the iron itself starts off as like a triangle or like a square, a very simple shape. And then after working with the tattoo artist, designing with them once they get it hot in the coals, and then they are able to kind of shape it and form it with their magic to match the design of the tattoo, and before branding it onto them. So I'm going to talk real briefly about the tattoo options. If you have a copy of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, it goes over this in a bit more detail and has actual examples for you. You can go ahead and check it out, or you can just come up with your own. So the tattoo artist probably has a specialty and a style depending on the artist themselves. And now the style refers to just aesthetically, what does it look like? Tribal or geometric or abstract, that sort of thing. But the specialty is where it gets a little more fun and unique. You might have and this specialty refers to the arcane aspect, the magical, like what powers does the player actually get from this tattoo. So you might have a tattoo artist who does really, really good work with abjuration tattoos. They kind of shy away from conjuration or evocation, stuff that's like maybe a little more dangerous. And so a really good idea, if you just want to make it simple and straightforward, is cantrips or like first level spells. Those work great for these magic tattoos and are a really good way for non-magic users to get just some basic magical effects like dancing lights or mage hand, something like that. So if your PCs know about this potential encounter ahead of time, then you can come up with something unique for them, like modifying or slightly enhancing a very class or character specific ability. So for example, a barbarian, the ability to, maybe once per day while they're raging, they gain additional resistance to a chosen damage type. So while they're raging, they have this dope lightning bolt tattoo, and they can activate that as part of their rage, as a free action, bonus action, whatever. And then they have lightning resistance while they're raging for that time. Something else to consider is whether you want these tattoos to be a permanent boost or a recurring ability, or if you want it to be like a one-off, almost like a consumable, like a potion. Oh, you have this tattoo of a heart on your heart. And I think this is similar to one in Tasha's. When you go down to 0 HP, it kind of like brings you back to 1 HP or stabilizes you or something like that. But then once it's used, then the tattoo is gone. So when you're thinking of pricing, just consider one that is recurring or permanent is obviously going to generally cost a little bit more than one that is like a one-time or a limited time use. So that's what I got for you. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please share it with a friend, subscribe, like it, and leave a comment. What sort of cool magical tattoos do you have in your campaigns? And of course, a huge shout out to my patrons, Rachel Alexandria, Connor O'Keefe, Christian Duncan, and Portal Wolf, for making this video possible and for allowing me to create 3 new creatures and 3 new magical items each and every month. If you are interested in checking those out, head on over to patreon.com/thealpinedm. Even as a free member, you'll still probably get at least 1 creature and 1 free magic item each month. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.